Hi everyone, I want to show you this mask that I did up recently. This I bought from like a Halloween shop many years ago. It's been on my wall hanging on a hook for years, and it's kind of in the style of like a long nose Venetian mask, like the shape of it, but it hasn't got that like the design to it. Like, it's just very plain. Originally my thoughts were I was going to turn it into some sort of like plague doctor mask or something, but I ended up never doing anything with it in the end. And I found it in my studio the other day hanging around and thought it's about time I did something with it. So first of all, this is made out of like, I think it's basically card with faux leather on top. It's definitely not real. It's the plastic stuff because it melted with the glue gun a little bit. And underneath there's like a sort of felty layer on the inside, and I decided to decorate it first of all, and then I'd work out how I was going to paint it later. So I started off by using hot glue and making these swirly patterns around the edges of the mask. I figured I wanted some sort of almost embossed design, like a raised design on it, and this is what I thought of, so this is what I stuck with. So I just used the hot glue to draw these shapes onto the mask, and the idea is the hot glue will set, and it's like plastic really when it's set, and then what I can do is paint it afterwards. So that's why I chose to use the hot glue. I probably could have used, I don't know, puffy paint or something like that maybe, but this is what I had to hand. You have to excuse my hand trembling. My hand does that every so often. It's just to do with the medication I have, and today we was having a particularly trembly day, so if my hand shakes, don't worry about it. And sometimes you have to squeeze a little bit harder to get the hot glue to come out when the gun's first turned on, so that can make your hand tremble anyway. So I'm going over the mask, making these designs, and I carried that on all over the mask, all around the edges of the mask, and then some of these patterns I added to the centre of the mask, like at the front and down the sort of nose piece. As you can see here, all you need to do is you need a steady flow of glue to come out of the glue gun, and you just go very slowly so you can get a nice even line of glue. I find this works better when the glue is a little cooler, because as the glue heats up sometimes I get bubbles in it, which obviously can interfere with you getting it to neat. And then just keep adding to it until you're happy with it. And then the next thing is to paint the whole thing black so that all the glue is black instead of this sort of semi-transparent colour. And also this makes the mask black as well, and it just blends everything together and makes it look like it's all part of the same mask as opposed to the mask with something stuck on it. I kind of wanted it to have like a almost carved effect or something, so, or yeah, sort of carved or embossed effect. So painted the whole thing black, and I just used for this acrylic paint, just pretty much neat out of the tube. To be fair, I didn't water it down much. My brush was wet because it had been on soak, but I didn't actually like mix loads of water with the paint. And anywhere where the paint was a bit thin, I just went over it again, because if you do the paint basically straight from the tube, it sticks to the hot glue better. And I just covered the whole thing in black, and then made sure that every area was covered, and then I dried it with my heat gun actually. You can use a hairdryer or a heat gun to speed up the drying process. Just be careful though, because if you have it on a spot for too long, or if you have it too hot, what can happen is you heat up the hot glue that you've used to decorate the mask, and it can start to move and run. So you just got to be careful. It's easier if you're not sure, just leave it to dry. If it's a warm day, it's only going to take about an hour at the most. but I didn't want to wait an hour, so I did dry it with my heat gun in the end. And just make sure you go in all those nooks and crannies around the designs you've added on. Make sure you cover any little gaps and get right into those cracks and crevices. This like leathery material have got a lot of like little cracks and stuff in it. It's just the texture of the material, which I wanted to keep, but for now I just concentrated on making sure I got the black paint in all those little nooks and crannies and all little grooves and scratches all over the mask, because that'll be important later to make those details show up. And then, like I said, once it was covered, just dried it off with the heat gun, just for about, I don't know, 5 minutes at the most. And then I noticed when it dried, there was a couple of little areas I'd missed, so I touched those up and then dried those as well. And then the next thing you want to do is, once it's completely dry, is then start adding the colour to the mask. So as you can see here, the mask is now dry, and I take this is a metallic luster wax, and it's in copper. Yeah, it's called Copper Kettle. It's just something I got off Amazon. It's I'll put a link in the description box. And I like these metallic waxes because they stick quite well to acrylic paint. They stick quite well to the hot glue, and it just really adds that nice metallic feel to the mask. Now, you could do what I started off doing and just go over the little bumps that was created with the hot glue, so it's like little studs, and you could just leave the mask black and just go over the studs and details with the luster wax, which is what I started off doing, but I changed my mind halfway through, so you'll see that in a bit. So first of all, what I planned to do was just use the wax on the details. So you just got to be very careful not to touch the main area of the mask, and just go over those raised areas that you created with the hot glue. And I did that all around, as you can see, like that. And I liked how it looked, and you could leave it like this, but I did change my mind in the end about how I wanted the mask to look. Then just being careful to go over the areas, and what I find with this wax, because it's new, a lot goes on my finger, so what I tend to do is I tend to dab my finger into the wax and then dab it on the board, just to get rid of the excess, because otherwise it just goes everywhere, and it's very easy to miss areas and smudge it when there's a lot of the wax on your finger. Then the first idea I had was to fill in the eye area with the Copper Kettle wax colour, and I did like the look of that, but I decided to change it as well, but you'll see that in a bit. So here I am, just using the wax over the top of the black, and the black really makes that wax stand out, and also, as you can you see all those little like creases and cracks and things in the fake leather, the faux leather? Obviously they show up really well because I painted black underneath first of all before putting this wax stuff on top. I find if you put black underneath these waxes, they really show up really well, and they also make all the textures show up extremely well. And you could leave the mask at just having these eye areas and the raised details covered in the wax, but I decided to add some to the main body of the mask. I wanted to go for more of a metallic look, so I wanted the whole thing to look like metal. So I just applied that all over, and because I can't get in every single nook and cranny with my finger with the Copper Kettle colour, you get this effect where you've got these dark areas, so it still looks like the recessed areas are still sunken in and they're still dark, because the black paint's obviously still showing. And I find if you get areas where you've got like a really bright patch and then a really dark patch, just keep rubbing over it and it all blends in, and blends it into the fabric and stops it looking so patchy, because obviously when you start it will look quite patchy. But you just keep going over, and eventually the patchiness disappears, and you just get this nice sort of, oh, what do you call it? It's like almost like an antique effect, where it's like all dark in the nooks and crannies and the crevices. It's quite a nice easy effect to get, just with this luster wax, as you can see, and you can just leave it here at this stage if you wanted it just to look like this. I decided I wanted to make it look a bit more aged and a bit older, so I do a few more bits to it. Here I'm just getting rid of the patchiness that's in some of the areas. And then taking some black paint and a lot of water, what I'm doing here is just doing a little bit of a black wash over the inner area of the eye. I wanted to add a bit more depth to it and make it look a bit darker. I did go over this a few times in the end, adding more and more paint each time. But at this stage, because I wasn't 100% sure this is what I wanted to do, I just did black washes, just to make some of the areas stand out more and some of the areas recede a bit more, and just add a bit of variation. I didn't want it to look like it was brand new. So you see, I'm just applying the black wash basically all around the edges of the mask, and down the sides of the nose and underneath where the eyes stick out, and also a bit on the forehead, because I wanted to make that sort of frowny area stand out a bit more. And here you can see I've added more paint to the eye area. I just like how it's a nice, easy to achieve metallic effect using this stuff. And I've got gold. There's gold, copper kettle, silver. I think there's one other colour, I'm not sure. But I know that some other companies do this sort of thing as well. If you just go on and search for Gilding Waxes, basically this is what you'll find, or metallic waxes. And this is water based, by the way, which is why I can paint over the top of it. And I can also use water if I wanted to blend it in a bit more, or mix it, because you can mix this with water to use it like a paint as well. That's why it's quite useful. Here I'm adding a bit more of a darker black wash into the centre of the eye area that I created with the hot glue. I wanted the eyes to stand out a bit more, and I felt everything just sort of all blended in as to one piece, so I wanted to add a bit more detail, a bit more definition. And I don't know, I just think it looks better with the eyes looking darker. I do find that if I've gone over an area with plenty of the wax, it'll take about 2 or 3 coats with acrylic paint to actually get it to come through and go back to black. Because what happens is you put the first couple of layers of black on, and basically the copper shows through enough just to make it so it's like a coppery black, if you get what I mean. So the darker you want it, the more layers you're going to need to go over the top. And just make sure that between each layer you dry it off with a heat gun, or let it dry. As it was, my room's quite warm, so it did dry off quite quick. But you'll see in a sec, I did get out my heat gun to dry off the eye area, because I decided I wanted to do a little bit of dry brushing over the top just to get some of the details to stand out a bit. And here I'm just mixing my grey paint. I did mix a little bit of it in with the black, as you can see, but then decided I definitely needed to dry it off with my heat gun. And as you can see, I'm using side-to-side motions and going quite quick, because I don't want to focus on one area, because otherwise I'll melt the hot glue. As you can see, and the way to tell if the acrylic paint has dried is it goes from shiny to matte, and then you know it's dry. And then I could dry brush over the top. I wanted to make this eye socket shape show up a bit more. In the end, before I hung it on my wall, I did go over this again with black, just to blend it in a bit more and make it, the dry brushing, not look quite so obvious. And as you can see, I'm going over like the inner corners and underneath where it sticks out on the mask, just to make that stand out more, just to give the eye a bit more shape. And that's all I carried on doing really on this mask, was layers of dry brushing and layers of like black washes. And you'll see in a bit I actually get out a little bit of green as well, and I use that to go over the mask as well, because I figure, well, if it's a copper mask and it's old, so it's starting to like oxidize and stuff, it gets this sort of greeny bluey coating to it. Copper does when it's starting to like corrode. So I added a bit of green as well as the dry brush into it. I didn't want to make it want to make it look like it had completely oxidized. Think you know, like the Statue of Liberty, that's like made out of copper, and that sort of greeny colour it's got is from the oxidisation. I didn't want to make it that colour, but I wanted it to look like it's just starting to have hints of oxidisation here and there. Maybe it's got a bit of moss is starting to grow on it. I wanted it to look like it's been in the elements, and it's been well used, and then maybe it's hung up on a wall and it's just started to corrode or something. That was kind of my idea behind it. I didn't want it to look new, put it that way. And then what I'm going to do is figure out, I want to do some like cobwebs and stuff over it to make it look like it's maybe been on a dusty shelf or something for years. But I haven't figured out how I want to do the cobwebs yet. I've seen a few different ways of doing them that I want to try, but I'll do that as another video. I normally use hot glue, but it doesn't always show up as much as I want. But I've seen some other ways of doing it with some like contact cement and stuff, so I'm going to have a go at that. So here I'm adding a bit of dry brushing on the raised points to make them stand out a bit more, like on the cheekbones and going down the nose shape. And that's pretty much it. I did add a little bit of silver luster wax on some of the little sort of rivety things that I put on the mask. And I did tone some of them down a little bit with a bit of a black wash over the top, just very lightly. And then apart from that, that's pretty much it. I just carried on with the dry brushing and adding little washes of black and adding little touches of the green here and there and dabbing it off with a cloth. And that was it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.